Okay. Ah, I'm never not gonna stub my toe on that thing, man. Jesus Christ.
All right, tonight's the night. You're gonna go out, you're gonna do some sick ass night photography. It's gonna look like some shit out of Blade Runner. It's gonna be cinematic as fuck. You grab your stuff, you get to the spot, you take the shot, you go home, you start editing. Wait, what the fuck is this? This doesn't look like Blade Runner at all. All right, don't worry, there is a solution to this. Say hello to the Black Promise filter. Before we go over how this thing works, we do have to understand what this actually does to your image. And just like last time, in the end, I'll give you some suggestions on what to look out for when purchasing one of these bad boys. And I'll also let you know exactly which one this is. I love this thing. I'm gonna split this first part into 7 short parts to explain what this thing does to your footage/photos. So a Promise filter is basically just a piece of glass that you can screw onto the front of your lens, and it reduces contrast, it softens skin, and it blooms the highlights like crazy, which is probably why most people want one. The primary function of a Promise filter is to diffuse the light entering the lens. The filter has a slightly textured surface made from clear optical resin or glass that's been speckled with small particles. When light passes through this filter, the particles scatter the light in various directions. So that's the first thing that a Promise filter does. The second thing is the softening effect. This diffusion of light oftentimes softens the entire image. It can reduce the appearance of wrinkles and blemishes and other minor imperfections in portrait subjects. So even if you're just a portrait photographer, this thing is actually pretty solid. So the third thing is it lowers the contrast by scattering the light. So this can be useful in high contrast lighting situations, helping preserve details in both the shadows and the highlights. This one only applies to Promise filters, not black. This is a black Promise filter, so it doesn't apply to Promise filters. It only applies to black Promise filters. So I'll explain what I mean in just a minute. So the fourth thing that this thing does, and it's probably what it's mostly known for, is it adds a subtle glow and halation around highlights. If you can't tell, actually, really quick, I have not had this thing on. So if you look at my little key light here, it's a light, but if you put this bad boy on here, I'm not gonna screw it all the way in. Now it looks really cool, right? I'll leave it on for now. I don't know if you can also tell or not. I'll probably do my own B-roll example later. It does make my skin look a little bit nicer. I have no skincare routine, so couldn't hurt to have one of these bad boys, right? So this effect can give a nice, like, dreamy, surreal look that we often associate with a lot of movies and TV shows, and because it kind of just looks sick as f. It looks really cinematic. So number 5, another thing with these Promise filters is that they do come in different strengths. So a higher grade filter will provide a more pronounced effect, whereas a lower grade will be a little bit more subtle. I'll go in a little bit more into detail on that in a couple minutes as well. But overall, this just kind of allows you to choose how strong you want the effect to be, because you don't always want it overpowering the entire image. Maybe you want something a little bit more subtle, but something that's definitely noticeable. So number 6 is that these things are actually pretty versatile, believe it or not. While personally I'd say that Promise filters are more known for the crazy effect they can have on like night photography with like neon signs and like colored lighting and stuff like that, it can also be used in things like landscape photography, portrait photography, even sports photography, because it kind of just creates its own mood and atmosphere in whatever you're photographing. It kind of just gives the photo its own little touch that it might not have had without it. And I'll be honest, and I'm about to talk about this a little bit more, but it's pretty hard to get this effect in post. And number 7 is the application of Promise filters in a digital age. Despite being able to use post-processing effects to get this kind of like glowy effect, a lot of photographers and filmmakers still prefer the organicness of a Promise filter. They definitely have a different level of quality compared to using like the glow effect in DaVinci. I don't think it really comes close to like what a Promise filter can do. The other thing too is it's a lot easier to come up with shots or see what your shot's gonna look like when you have the Promise filter already on there. So while you're filming, you can kind of see how the glow is gonna look. It makes it a little bit easier to see the effect in real time. And I kind of already said this, but it is pretty hard to get a clean Promise effect in post, especially in Lightroom. I don't even think it is possible in Lightroom. If you drag like the clarity slider all the way down, you'll get kind of a glowy effect, but then you do also lose detail. Whereas like if you have a black Promise filter, you really don't lose that much detail. You just get the glowy effect. To get the glowy effect and preserve detail in post with photos, you definitely need Photoshop, and even then it still isn't, like, I've tried doing it before. It looks cool, but it's not a Promise filter. DaVinci Resolve, if you're shooting videos, has a pretty cool glow effect that can get this effect, or even just halation. But if you don't know how to really dial that effect in, again, it's still not going to look as clean as a ProMist filter. It just won't. Little side note too, try not to confuse a ProMist filter with a smoke filter. I did this when I had my A6300. I got like a smoke filter that I thought was basically the same thing. It's not. They're pretty similar, but it's not the same thing. A smoke filter reduces the whole image's contrast. It gives a glow, but it brings the shadows up like crazy. It makes the image look flat, like super flat. Like imagine shooting S-Log and then adding more flatness onto it. It's not that good unless you're going for a specific effect with that like flat or like, I guess, smoky look. But a smoke filter is going to reduce all the contrast. It is going to bloom the highlights, but like I said, it's going to make it look even more flat, whereas a black ProMist filter only affects the highlights. The blacks and the contrast pretty much stays the same, and it keeps a lot of the detail in the darks and the lights as well. All right, real quick, I want to go over how these things are made because I think it's interesting, and it never hurt to understand how things work when you're trying to buy new camera gear. So the starting point for, and I'm reading off of a script for this one because God knows I didn't know this off the top of my head. The starting point for a ProMist filter is typically a clear, high-quality optical glass or resin. So this material has to have really good transparency and minimal distortion to make sure that the quality is top-notch. And the key feature of a ProMist filter is the textured surface, which is created by applying a diffusive material onto the glass or resin. This is usually done in one of two ways. It's either a coating, which is a special compound containing fine microparticles that is evenly coated onto the surface of glass or resin. The other potential way would be embedding particles into the glass. So they'll have like diffusive particles that they'll embed into the actual glass of the filter or resin. Apparently this method ensures a more uniform distribution and permanent diffusion effect. So my non-professional assumption is that the embedded particles are better quality because it won't wear off over time, whereas a coating might wear off over time. And my guess is that the embedded particle ones are much more expensive. And then the final step is just quality assurance, checking to ensure that the filter's quality is top-notch. This includes checking the uniformity of the coating or the particles, and then also making sure that there's no distortion in the filter as well. Additionally, despite the diffusion, a well-made ProMist filter maintains the quality of the overall image. So basically, a ProMist filter is usually it's just a bunch of particles within the glass that disperse the light that's going into it so that it alters the image that the lens is seeing. That obviously, like I said, results in a more soft, glowy, halation-like image. Okay, so with all that in mind, which one should you buy? So there's a couple things you should look out for when you're buying one, because despite what it looks like, it's not just a piece of glass on the front of your lens. So the first thing is whether you want a black ProMist filter or a ProMist filter. I talked about that briefly before. Charlie, what the is the difference? A black ProMist filter primarily affects the highlights of the image like this, while leaving things like, I don't know, the background or my face kind of untouched. Like it'll make my face a little bit softer. Like the contrast, I don't know, in my hair or in this microphone is pretty much untouched. While a ProMist, like just a ProMist filter, is gonna bring up the contrast of the darker spots of the image, like the background and stuff like that. And it'll also give that glow effect. So a black ProMist filter is a much more subtle look than a just normal ProMist filter. The one that's on the lens right now that I use is a black ProMist filter. So the second thing that you should look out for is the actual strength of the ProMist effect or the glow effect. I kind of talked about this briefly already. When you look up ProMist filter on B&H or Amazon or wherever you're getting it from, you'll see different options. You'll see like 1/4 or 1/2 or 1/8 even. This just has to do with the strength of it. The smaller the fraction, like 1/8, is gonna have a more subtle effect, where the higher the fraction is gonna be like 1/2, where it's gonna have a really strong effect. I think the maximum is 1/2. I could be wrong. As far as I know, the maximum you can buy is 1/2 and the minimum you can get is 1/8. Again, I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure, but I personally use a 1/4. I kind of like it in the middle. 1/8 is cool. It's a little too subtle. 1/2 is a little bit too strong for me. It might kind of drown out the image a little bit too much. Also, I'm not really 100% sure why they use fractions to determine the strength. All you need to know is 1/2 is the strongest and 1/8 is the weakest and 1/4 is in the middle. And then the last thing you need to pay attention to is the filter thread size. So basically just like the size of the filter that you buy. If you look at your lens, you'll see a little circle on it with a line through it. That's your lens's filter thread size, usually measured in like millimeters. So I'm shooting with the Sigma 24-70, so it has a filter thread size of 82 millimeters. So this ProMist filter is an 82 millimeter ProMist filter, which was not cheap. The filter can't be smaller than your thread size, otherwise you're gonna get some pretty nasty vignetting, but it can be bigger than your lens filter thread size, but you're gonna need step-up rings to be able to screw it on. I actually have some. They look like these. I am missing like 2 or 3 of them right now because I need them for my telephoto lens, but they'll unscrew so you can get the sizes you want. So if you have like I used to have a Sony a6300 and then I had like a 72mm ProMist filter. So the lens's filter size that I had was like 49mm, so I'd have to put this thing on here and have it go all the way up to 72mm. It looks a little funky, who cares? These things usually are only like 10 or 20 bucks on Amazon. There's really no reason to spend a bunch of money on a really good one. So just get one of these. This was like 20 bucks. All right, so the one that I use, the one that's on the camera right now, is a Tiffin 1/4 black ProMist filter. It's 82mm, like I said. It cost me around 100 bucks, and I know what you're thinking, why would I drop $100 on a piece of glass? I 100% understand where you're coming from, but like I said, this is not a normal piece of glass. I personally think it's very much worth the investment. It honestly, in my opinion, completely transforms all of your images and a lot of your footage. And I use this thing on like 90% of the things I do, so it also kind of acts as like a lens protection filter as well. I know it's kind of an expensive protection filter, but I mean, the lens was like $1,000, the filter was $100. I'd much rather the filter break than the lens. And mine was 100 bucks because it's an 82mm. I think the like 50s, what is it, 56? No, 58 mil. Yeah, like the 55 or I think like 58mm. I don't remember what size I saw, but it was only like 50 bucks. So it also depends on like what size you get. I had literally the biggest size option because the Sigma lens is ginormous. So it was a lot more expensive. One thing I will say though, and I'll be honest, you're not gonna wanna hear this. I recommend just getting the 82mm and then buying the step-up rings. Because if you don't have an 82mm as of today, if you do in the future, you don't have to buy a new ProMist filter to put it on. I know I made that mistake with my smoke filter, but I never used that thing anyways, so it's all right. But that's pretty much it. I hope this video helped you out a little bit. Like I said, I personally love this filter. I use it on like 90% of the things I do, like sports, portraits, obviously night photography as well. I use it all the time. It just gives a really nice, subtle effect that I think can definitely set your stuff apart from other people's work. So yeah, if you want to see more videos like this, definitely leave a like or a comment and let me know. I'd gladly make more. And till next time.